All right, we're happy to be welcoming back to Speaking of Data for his next appearance, Dave Stodder. Thanks so much for joining us, Dave. How are you today?
Good. How you doing, Andrew?
Doing well. I know you're kind of have a hectic day here, so I really appreciate you taking the time out to be with us here and talk about cloud migration and management today. A
Sure.
topic that I think many companies are considering, if not have already started the endeavor. So
hmm
of course, when we talk about cloud migration, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's moving your data and analytics from on-premise to the cloud. Is that essentially what we're talking about today?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the basic idea. Of course, there's a lot of variations in that
Hmm.
sentence. I mean, depending on well, we'll get into it, I guess, but the degree to which a company wants to put their data in the cloud, put their analytics in the cloud, their data integration in the cloud, and then of course there's what kind of cloud. Are you going all the way going to do bare metal, or are you going to do complete serverless computing and let the provider handle it? So there's a lot of variations.
Yeah, interesting. So let's get right into it here. Cloud migration, as we've mentioned, is clearly a top priority for many organizations. So what are the key cloud migration trends and drivers as far as TDWI is concerned that are tracking today?
Well, I think the one thing to think about, kind of on that previous point I made, is that cloud computing or cloud migration isn't happening in isolation. There's a lot of other things going on at the same time that organizations are trying to do to modernize their data, to support analytics better, to expand to allow more users, to fix some things that are happening with their legacy systems. And cloud is right in the middle of all of that. So I think in a way, looking at some of our research, the top 5 reasons why organizations want to move to the cloud haven't really changed that much. There's expanding data access for lower upfront investment, optimizing the data pipelines, the data transformations, improving data quality, increasing the speed and scale of data integration and processing and data management. Want to unify silos. That's another thing we see a lot in our research, is that organizations are hoping to consolidate from lots of different kinds of data silos into the cloud. And then, as I mentioned, digital transformation. So digital transformation being taking things that used to be kind of offline, maybe even paper-based processes and applications, and making them more software-driven, more data-driven, using analytics in them effectively. And then also, just because of where we are, I think moving them into the cloud. So, I think that's the part of it, is that those are kind of the main things that are going on. And just sort of look at a few other things I wanted to mention. Well, of course, the other is just sheer data volume. I mean, there's a lot of data that organizations have. Just talking to somebody today, I'm, kind of on the road today, so I'm not in my office, but talking to an organization, they're just trying to move petabytes of data into the cloud. And so the capacity, the speed issues are formidable. And so trying to look for better ways to automate that. It's going to be continuous. It's not just something they're doing once. So they have to sort of adjust all of their data refinement and kind of data curation cycles to that. So, it's a lot going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So you mentioned part of the reason why people would want to start their migration journey. As they begin this, what sort of challenges are you seeing these organizations face as they begin to migrate?
Well, as I mentioned, there's a lot of variations on cloud. So one of them is to make sure it matches up with what they want to do. And a lot of organizations have different variations on cloud. Some are moving more to the serverless computing, where they're letting everything be managed by the provider. But then there's lots of sort of step backs from that, depending on what they need. Often governance and security, we may talk about that more, are kind of part of it. How much control they want to have over the data, over the software. So that's part of it, is trying to figure out how that is going to work. What's the best? And then the other is when you get to moving the data, migrating the data, there's variations there. Some organizations initially tried to do just really kind of replatforming or lift and shift. That became popular. You're basically just trying to copy all your assets as fast as you can, little or no changes to it, just replatform often into a data lake, a cloud data lake, just to sort of get the data there. And that could work for some applications, but for others, the problem with that is you kind of carry over some of the problems that you have with the legacy systems. You know, it might be data quality problems or just things that were even uncovered or you weren't aware of that become suddenly you're very aware of them once you're in the cloud. And then so you just maybe miss opportunities where you could be modernizing your systems. And so what we see, in our research, a lot of organizations are doing lift and shifts, but a lot of organizations are doing more phased migrations. And there it's more incremental. You're kind of testing and validating the components, evaluating each phase as it goes by to make sure that it was done properly and you're happy with it. And so some of the advantages of that, you can limit the disruptions to other parts of the organization that you're not migrating right away. Because that's an issue is that as you move a data warehouse or move data, there's a lot of dependencies there from different applications and different kinds of users. And, they're going to be disrupted. There's no way around it. And so if you do phased migrations and really be careful about what are the dependencies, that can often work better. So then you sort of take some pipelines, some of your ETL pipelines and move them with a particular, maybe reporting system or dashboards, or if you're doing some data science projects, everything that's related to that. And so use those first. And we do see variations on that. Some organizations will start small and then grow. That's just kind of their idea to evaluate how everything is going. So they're just trying to really do small things. Some are also started with the idea, well, why don't we just leave on premises things that are working, and then we'll just move everything new to the cloud, or just start everything new in the cloud. So it's kind of a cloud first strategy for everything new. And that can be workable as well. But then again, you don't want to lose the opportunity to modernize some of the legacy systems. The worst is that we do see some organizations have no overall strategy, where they're just kind of moving piecemeal. And that's often where, as you can expect, organizations kind of run into problems that way.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, go ahead, Arthur.
No worries. I was going to ask you a question about, operating in a hybrid architecture, something you just touched on, where, certain organizations are leaving some of these items on premise and moving some to the cloud, as far as their data and analytics. So how is it possible that they can manage this kind of hybrid architecture?
Well, that is one of the biggest challenges, and we see a lot of concern about it, particularly around governance, because governance requirements are getting pretty onerous these days, particularly in highly regulated industries like banking and finance and pharmaceuticals. They've got to really keep track of sensitive data, and so really, it's a big challenge is to be able to inventory all the data, account for how people are using and sharing the data, how it's being analyzed. And so if you can imagine, if you move it to some on premises, some on cloud, and then we see a lot of hybrid multi-cloud where there's some on premises and then some in multiple cloud systems, that can be pretty complex. And so that, I think, is one of the things really driving interest in data fabrics, where you basically are trying to create a layer, and often metadata at the center of that layer. So you have a data catalog or something like that, to provide a good inventory to understand, what the whole data lifecycle is, across all these different systems. And so data fabric is the idea of putting kind of that layer in between that allows you to govern the data, know the inventory, and then really use that to improve access and findability of the data, so that users are not frustrated by it. So it's definitely one of the issues, and particularly as we see organizations, as I mentioned, doing those phased migrations where not all of the data is going at once, and so they're going to live with a distributed architecture. And I do talk to a lot of organizations that understand that really, as much as they try to consolidate data, they're not going to be able to consolidate all the data. There's going to be mergers and acquisitions. They're going to be the business is going to reshape itself over time. And so there's just going to be distributed data. And there's also a lot of new data, because I mentioned, a lot of things going on at the same time, as cloud migration. One of them is just organizations trying to get more value out of all this data, like the unstructured data, semi-structured data. These systems are maybe not or frequently not in relational systems. It might be in document databases or other kinds of NoSQL systems. And so, those are just going to be distributed systems that are out there. So it's very important to be looking at distributed architectures such as a data fabric. And then, there's also data mesh, which is kind of a different version of that.
Yeah, we did a podcast with Fern Helper, your colleague, our colleague,
Yeah.
on the data mesh that's out last couple of weeks, and that was a very interesting conversation there. But it obviously seems like it might come into play when you consider a cloud migration as well. And it's something you touched on was data governance. Obviously, that's going to be a major concern, and it seems like TDWI research reflects that as well. So, how does data governance affect cloud migration strategies?
Well, one thing, it could also just put brakes on some cloud migration. And as I mentioned, the regulated industries, they often are either just deciding not to move certain data to the cloud or pulling back and deciding they want to keep this sensitive data on premises about customers or just other kinds of sensitive data with customers, be personally identifiable information. And but then other organizations are feeling very secure. They feel that the cloud is secure. And so it actually gives them an opportunity to improve security access to that data, and then be able to govern it effectively, and maybe setting aside, say, sensitive customer data into its own customer data platform or customer data warehouse, something like that, so that they can really protect that data. Of course, there's downsides to that as well, because sometimes you get into a lot of data duplication, and there's the whole process of trying to keep the data up to date. So other organizations are just deciding to use their data warehouse or data lakehouse effectively for that purpose. So I think that's the thing is governance should be a primary consideration in cloud migration, because it might be something that's going to, as I said, put the brakes on some migration. And you have to be thinking about that.
Great. So as we try to wrap this up a little bit, obviously this is a topic we could drill down into for hours, I'm sure. But as we try to give you some more time in your day, what would you say are the best practices and technology solution trends people should be considering for improving their cloud migration and management?
Well, I think a few things. One is, think of everything. As I mentioned, a lot of the dependencies out there, that the cloud migration is not happening in isolation. You're trying to do things like improve the user experience in your organization. So if you move to the cloud, can that be, make accessing data sources more transparent? Can you hide some of the complexity so that when users are looking at, say, a more of a web interface, they're able to get to things that they couldn't get to before, but you're not exposing the complexity to them. So thinking about the user experience is important. Not forgetting all the analytics that you're building up, because a lot of organizations, they'll move the data, but they kind of forget about they got to move the code, the models, statistics, algorithms, things like that, that are related to the data sources, the analytics, in other words. And so look at what you need to do to move the analytics, and then think about your development and testing cycles that you're going to be undergoing. Maybe you have some already happening. So what is the cloud migration going to do for those? So think about all of that. I think another thing is, when you're looking at migrating, you don't want to lose all of that expertise and talent that you have in the on-premises systems. So make sure you have good documentation, that you're really in touch with all of the people who have the expertise in those on-premises analytics or ETL systems, and consult with them. And then probably the final thing I should mention is really cost management, because we do see in our research that there's a lot of sticker shock, organizations seeing costs rising. And so make sure you're thinking about what could be the cost drivers and have good transparency or visibility, I should say, into what could be the cost drivers. And there's improvement in monitoring and data observability. That's sort of a term that's being used. FinOps is kind of part of that too, just trying to build a structure around the practice of looking at cloud costs, the migration costs, and having a better understanding of it, because you don't want to have surprises. Everybody's often moving to the cloud to lower costs, and so you don't want to suddenly get bills that are making you realize it's going to be much higher costs.
Well, that's fantastic. I think those are all great things for our audience members to keep in mind. And of course, at TDWI, we have had a plethora of research reports and webinars on the topic as well. So if you'd like to drill down into this topic further, you can head over to tdwi.org. We have a bunch of research and resources available under the research and resources tab there. And so, Dave, I'll let you go at this point. I really appreciate you coming on and sparing us a few minutes to talk this through with us. Is there any research that you want to call out specifically for this topic?
I think, our best practices report that we've been publishing lately have a lot of stuff on cloud computing. And as you mentioned, it's a big topic for us. So we've had a lot of good webinars and everything. And I'll be doing my research report coming up, and it'll have something about cloud as well.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thanks again, Dave. I'll let you go. Hope you have a good rest of your day and a good flight, safe flight as well, as you make your way across the U.S. And we'll see you again soon. Okay.
Okay. Take care, Andrew.
All right. Thanks so much.